Welcome back to the latest episode of TT Plays. My name's Sung Soo, and today I'm just going to answer a listener question, which is kind of cool. I haven't done that before directly in a video. So CorpJJ asked just a few hours ago, first, this great video. Thank you for watching. It was super helpful for someone like me who is new to Grand Archive. Always a big fan of discussions like this, and it really helps a new player contextualize the value provided by these new cards. Since I just started playing Water and Neo's Tony, I was looking for some guidance, and I'm glad I found the channel. Speaking of guidance, I need some help on how to utilize Fracturize the best. I noticed that every water deck list runs Fracturize as a 4 of, so there must be something I'm not understanding when it comes to the card. While I've been playing, I haven't really felt good Fracturizing at any point unless it was to get rid of a Viridian protection trinket, and even then it feels bad to give the opponent a reservable fractal like that. I was wondering if you could give any insight on how to best utilize Fracturize, and some example targets for Fracturize. The local meta is infested with Tristans and slime Sylvies, if that helps provide any context. It does help provide context. And yeah, let's run through Fracturize. So you said you're a new player, so we're going to go over the basics here. And the first thing I want to talk about with Fracturize is Fracturizing your own items. Now I know that sounds weird, but hear me out. It is not unusual to see someone materialize a Grand Crusader's ring, Fracturize their own ring, respond to the Fracturize, and go ahead and sack the Grand Crusader's ring. Well, what does this do? Well, it just gets the Fracturize into the bin, so we have that floating memory, and we're still drawing our card off of this. So in those situations where playing Fracturize is basically a dead floating memory card, which a lot of taller decks, if you need to utilize the float, and you've identified that Fracturize isn't great in this matchup, it's a great way to utilize it. So that's the first thing I want to say is don't be afraid to Fracturize your own thing that you're about to consume. Consume the item so the Fracturize fizzles. It still ends up in the graveyard, so you have that floating memory. I think the second thing we have to talk about is Nullifying Lantern. So Nullifying Lantern is a zero-cost regalia that says cards in graveyard are normal element. They're not any other element, right? So it's manipulating graveyard. And this is really powerful for shutting down a variety of decks, right? It prevents Crux Sight. It stops King Slime, because King Slime requires 3 different element slimes in the graveyard. It stops Erupting. It stops Icebound Slam. There's a ton of interactions with Nullifying Lantern. It's arguably the single most powerful piece of regalia you can bring out. And Fracturize protects it, because Fracturize turns it into a Cleric Fractal, and while it's that fractal, your own lantern, right, it still makes cards normal element. Now you might ask, why does that happen? And we'd have to refer to the layer and continuous effects for Grand Archive. Now, I've made another video for that. I'll link it down in the comments, but I'll run it through here. And I'll spend a little bit more time, because after I made that initial video, there were a ton of good questions in the comments. So layering works from top down. So we're going to resolve Alpha, then Bravo, then Charlie, then Delta, then Echo. And we're just real quickly going to run through them. So effects and rules for setting base values or properties apply. Okay? Effects and rules that modify a card's type, supertype, type, or subtype. Effects or rules modifying card or object's elements are applied. That sure sounds like Nullifying Lantern. Effects or rules that add or subtract abilities are applied. This is where Fracturize is applied. Effects or rules that increase or decrease power, life, durability, or other things. And spoilers, that's where Viridian Protective Trinket applies. So when we look at this, knowing that an item is going to apply its effects from the top down, Nullifying Lantern is applying at level C, right? Level Charlie. If we Fracturize our own lantern, the Fracturize happens at D. So because the Fracturize happens after, if we Fracturize our own Nullifying Lantern, we are saying cards in graveyard are the normal element. By Fracturizing our own lantern, we A, have that mana rock, that fractal we can tap because of the reservable. B, a lot of the items that destroy regalia do not destroy Fractal Fantasia. So there's a lot of value in Fracturizing your own Nullifying Lantern to protect it. Lastly, if we Fracturize a Viridian Protective Trinket, the reason that trinket doesn't still provide its continuous effect is, again, the trinket is taking place on layer E for Echo. Since at D, we're turning it into a fractal and it loses all other abilities, by the time we make it to layer E, those abilities are lost. For Nullifying Lantern, again, because it's kind of confusing, since we're not losing abilities to layer D, at layer C we still have those abilities. We're nullifying all the element types at that level, right? And then later on we're using the Fracturize effect comes in. So you can Fracturize your own Nullifying Lantern to try to protect it. And the Grand Archive rules actually have if you jump over to their website, they have a really good continuous rule thing. Here's actually the example of Nullifying Lantern, because so many questions have come up about it. And here are the layers, so you know I'm just not kind of pontificating and making things up. The last thing that I'll say about fracturizing your own items is you can fracturize your own weapons. It's a little weird, but if you look at the combat phase in 15, it says if a weapon leaves the field before damage is dealt to a champion, any damage that would be dealt due to the weapon will not be calculated. However, if the weapon type is changed during an attack, it will be used and it will still be considered as a card involved in the attack, and it will contribute its power. So you said you're playing Water Neos Tony, so if you fracturize your own Bulwark, let's pretend Bulwark only had 1 durability, so you're going to lose at the end anyway. You're giving yourself a fractal. You have the Fracturize floating memory in your bin, and you're still contributing that damage through. So it's just something to remember there. You could use it to contribute 2 damage in that case as well. So those are cases where you would fracturize your own card. Now, you said there are a lot of Tristans and Sylvies, so I thought we'd just jump over to Lexera's map and we could take a look at some of these lists. Here's Caben's list, and there's a few items here that I think are really good fracturized targets. I think the first one is going to be Poison Dagger. Why doesn't that magnify? That's awkward. All right, there's a Poison Dagger. I did it. Right, it enters the field rested. But then Poison Dagger has a ton of potential coming out of the backside of that, right? It's going to deal 1 damage, and it's basically going to increase everything. So if the opponent is going really wide, right, Poison Dagger can easily contribute 4, 5, 6, 7 damage a turn. Since it comes into play rested, it's a great target for Fracturize. You can Fracturize it on your end step, you can Fracturize it whenever, but it's a great way to protect it. So Fracturize, shutting down Poison Dagger is extremely potent. One of the other items we'll see here is Shadowclaw. Shadowclaw is just a recurring weapon here. Basically, all their little allies are going to utilize it. So this is A, going to give Tristan a way to attack you so that their Phantasias, the Shadows, will be able to attack. And then B, the Shadows can use this, and because of this kind of text down there, they don't really use a durability on it. So Shadow's Claw, again, incredibly powerful. That's another item out of Tristan that I would have no problem fracturizing. Now, some of the other items in Tristan are definitely a little more corner case here. Sometimes I would fracturize Windwalker Boots. Again, it's a recurring item. It's like, you'd have to think about it. Do they want to banish it to draw a card? I mean, they'd have to have the prep counters. Do they want the, basically, mana rock in play? Or the prep counter. So you would have to determine kind of where that is. But I think the Shadowclaw and the Poison Dagger are both great targets for Fracturize. And again, that's on top of fracturizing your own cards to protect them. Those are just some items. I do want to talk about Backup Charger real quickly. Now, everyone might say Backup Charger is a horrible thing to fracturize. And I'm like, maybe. So in Tristan, I agree, it might not be the best thing to fracturize. But in Rye or other level 3 kind of turbo decks, if they materialize a Backup Charger and pass, I might shoot the Fracturize on their end step. Now, the reason being is there are a lot of decks like Rye or something, or even Merlin, that might be utilizing this to get cards down to level up, but they're also holding up interaction in their hand as well. Let's pretend they have a Frostbind and 2 of their cards. They probably want to go through your turn to see if that Frostbind has legs, and if it doesn't, right, then on the end step, they'll go ahead and banish the Backup Charger to summon a Power Cell, right? So that allows them to hold up the interaction for your turn, and then at the end of the turn, they're going to go card positive here, right, because they're going to draw a card from this, get themselves a Power Cell, and then move to their turn and use those 3 cards down to level up and materialize their higher level champion. So forcing them to do that, again, if they do Backup Charger pass, forcing them to use that Backup Charger and not be able to sit on that interaction, I think is useful. I don't see that in Tristan as much, but I think if you're playing into Rye or something, it's definitely something you should consider. So for Tristan decks, I think Poison Dagger, Shadow's Claw, maybe the Boots, and maybe Backup Charger are all things we can definitely target. Now, Sylvie doesn't have as many targets, but he definitely still has some really relevant targets. The first one is obviously going to be Beastbound Paws here, right? Banish, they're going to get True Sight. If we're going to pop it in our turn, right, on our turn, they're not going to get any kind of benefit or utilization from it. So I think pause is a phenomenal one. Also, any item that's going to give them levels. There's a bunch of different Sylvie items that gives them levels. This deck doesn't run any of them, so that makes me look a little bad. But any item that gives them levels, you could use the Fracturize to shut off Pride. One of the other things is Gaia's Blessing is incredibly powerful, right? You play with the top card of your deck reveal, and you can activate allies from there. So this is basically extending their hand size by 1. It's drawing them an additional card every turn. If you want to look at it that way, I think Gaia's Blessing is incredibly powerful. I think that's a great target. Covenant of Thorns might be shutting you down, killing them, right? If damage would be dealt to your champion, deal that to the linked ally instead. Again, another incredibly powerful and potent card, and especially if they had to pay something for it, I know they get the class bonus. If they had to pay something for it, then Fracturize kind of gets even more benefit out of it. Horn of Beast Calling, Stone Scale Band, Verdant Scepter, all same concept. These are all just really powerful cards. Now, I do want to talk about Grail here real quickly. I think Fracturizing a Grail can be really beneficial, and there's a few different times you can utilize it. In response to the ETB, right, on enter, ETB stands for enter the battlefield, banish target non-champion. So you can respond and Fracturize the Grail before they put an item underneath it. So they're using the Grail to protect the item underneath it, or possibly to put a terror card underneath it that they can't materialize yet, but they're going to dungeon guide and they want to materialize later on in their turn. So by responding to the ETB, you can kind of negate the Grail. The other option is if you think they're putting something under this that has a cost, you could Fracturize the Quicksilver Grail when they don't have any cards down in their memory. So then even if they sack the Grail, they're not going to be able to pay for the item, so you possibly can get a 2-for-1 on it. So I think Fracturizing Quicksilver has a lot of potential there as well. And again, a bunch of really relevant terror cards. All of these cards here I would be fine Fracturizing. Just some other cards I want to shout out, and I don't know if they're going to be here. I haven't looked at this. We talked about the trinket already. Vapor Jet is a Haas. It costs 2. Fracturizing this feels great every time I run it out there. Your opponent thinks they have all this great damage prevention and mitigation, and you're like, nope, you do not. The other thing is Scepter in the mirrors, as I'm sure you've run into some water mirrors. I think Scepter... Do they run a Scepter here? No, we see less Scepters. But Scepter is another card that's kind of incredibly potent to run the Fracturize out on. So I hope that helped. I hope that was a couple real-life examples there. So remember, we can Fracturize our own things, we can Fracturize opponents' things, and we can Fracturize guns if guns become relevant in your meta. I really don't know if I want to talk about that. Is there a list here? But okay, yeah, I guess we should talk about it. When your opponent goes to load a bullet, you have 2 options. We could Fracturize the bullet, we could Fracturize the gun. Spoilers, Fracturizing the bullet doesn't do anything. Fracturizing the gun will make it so the bullet fails to load, but the bullet is still on the field. If the bullet is already loaded into the gun, and they are not attacking with the gun, you could Fracturize the gun, and then the bullet is stuck under that Fantasia. It's stuck under there forever. It can't ever get out. I don't know of a way it could get out. But it's basically stuck under there. So you negate the bullet and the gun. This, to me, would be a misplay by the Ranger player. I don't expect them to give you this opportunity. But if they did, 100% jam the Fracturize. I'm sorry, there's not a Diana list here for me to pull up. So you're just going to hear me talk as you look at this graph. Or we can look at these pretty pictures. The last option is when they attack with a loaded gun, you could Fracturize it. Now, this gun is still going to send all of its power through, just like we learned about Fracturizing our own weapons. The weapon will lose any relevant text on it, which is important if there's maybe applying double on hits or something like that for Diana. And the bullet will still move along, and the bullet by that point, because the attack has already happened, has already gone back to the Regalia deck. But in the future, they won't be able to use the gun against you. So Fracturizing to Rangers is incredibly powerful. Even if it's just limiting them to them only attacking with the gun once, that's great. If they mess up and the gun's loaded and they cast something else without attacking, Fracturize that gun, trap that bullet in there, and if they go to load, if you want to stop the load, you can Fracturize the weapon. The bullet is still tapped or exhausted or rested, It doesn't load, it doesn't get stuck in the ether, but they're not going to be attacking you with that gun or that bullet this round. So I do think that's important as well. So all in all, I think Fracturize is incredibly powerful. Whether we're just using it as a dead floating memory card to get floating memory in our graveyard because we've identified the matchup isn't good, whether our opponents are playing high value cards, or if we're protecting our Nullifying Lantern, I definitely think you should continue to run Fracturize at least of a 3 of, probably a 4 of, and I hope this helps you out. So thank you so much for watching the video. To everyone else, I hope you found this beneficial. If you have any questions or want me to make a short video on helping a newer or mid-level player that has some questions or on interactions or things like that, leave a comment. I'm happy to do it. People are always bugging me to make more beginner content. I think I make a lot of beginner content, but I do appreciate the support. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for the comment. And until next time, everyone, cheers and happy gaming.